Admiral Kang stood motionless on the bridge of the Confederation flagship Eternal Harmony *. His forearms remained perfectly still at his sides, only the slight ripple of his copper-toned skin betraying his excitement. After decades of observation, the moment had finally arrived. First contact with the humans of Earth. "The human vessel is approaching, Admiral," reported Lieutenant Park from her station. Her thin fingers danced across the control interface, the bioluminescent panels responding to her touch. "Their trajectory is exactly as agreed upon." Kang nodded. "Excellent. Open a channel when they reach the designated coordinates." The view screen displayed a small angular craft, primitive by Confederation standards, but impressive for a species that had only achieved faster-than-light travel within the last century. The humans had responded to the Confederation's initial communication with surprising calm and efficiency, agreeing to this meeting in neutral space near their orbital habitats. "Their design philosophy is interesting," observed Commander Sun, the ship's senior xenobiologist. "Notice the reinforced hull plating and what appear to be weapon mounts, despite this being a diplomatic vessel." Kang's secondary eyes blinked in acknowledgement. The humans emerged from a particularly violent evolutionary path. Their historical records indicate nearly constant warfare. We must be patient with their defensive mindset. The bridge crew, representing 5 different species from across the Confederation, watched as the human ship performed a precise maneuver, coming to a relative stop 500 kilometers from the Eternal Harmony *. "They've matched our position exactly," Park noted with approval. "Their navigational skills are impressive." "Open the channel," Kang ordered. Before Park could comply, warning signals flashed across her console. "Admiral, energy surge detected from the human orbital habitat. Pattern matches weapons charging." Kang's skin darkened with alarm. "Are you certain? The diplomatic protocols." "Confirmed." Park's voice rose with panic. "Multiple targeting systems activating. They're locking onto us." Commander Sun moved quickly to her station. "Let me see." "No time." Park's hand hovered over the defense array. They'd violated the agreement. "Defensive protocols authorize immediate response." Kang hesitated for just a moment. One fatal moment. "Lieutenant, wait." Too late. Park activated the Eternal Harmony's main defense system. A pulse of concentrated energy lanced out from the Confederation flagship, designed to disable enemy weapon systems with surgical precision. But the humans' technology was different, their power distribution systems unfamiliar. The habitat, a spinning wheel-shaped structure housing thousands of civilians, absorbed the full force of the defensive pulse. Its power grid overloaded catastrophically. The structure didn't simply go dark. It exploded, rupturing into an expanding cloud of superheated gas and debris. "By the first ones," whispered Sun, her voice barely audible. "What have we done?" The bridge fell silent as the horror of what had just happened sank in. Kang stared at the expanding debris field, his mind refusing to process what his eyes were seeing. "Admiral," Park's voice trembled. "The habitat our scans indicated contained approximately 3,000 human life forms." Kang's outer skin paled to a sickly white. "Open communications with the human vessel. We must explain." "Sir," the tactical officer interrupted. "Multiple ships launching from Earth and the other habitats. They're on intercept courses at maximum acceleration." The view screen shifted to show dozens of human vessels, their engines burning hot as they rushed toward the Confederation fleet. The original diplomatic ship had already changed course, accelerating away from the Eternal Harmony *. "They're not responding to hails," Park reported, her earlier confidence replaced by growing dread. "All frequencies are filled with, I believe, their distress calls and military communications." Kang straightened his posture, forcing his color back to normal. "Maintain position. Activate translation systems on all frequencies. We must explain this terrible accident before." The ship shuddered as something struck its shields. "Kinetic projectiles," called out the tactical officer, primitive but numerous, shields holding at 97%. Do not return fire, Kang ordered firmly. Broadcast our apologies and... Another impact, stronger this time. The lights on the bridge flickered momentarily. New contact. Park's voice had risen an octave. Large vessel approaching from lunar orbit. It's firing something. The screen showed a massive human warship, easily twice the size of their diplomatic vessel. It released what appeared to be a swarm of small objects. Analysis, Kang demanded. Kang looked around at his bridge crew, then back at the tactical display showing the human warships surrounding them, primitive but undeniably effective. We came seeking peaceful contact with a young species, he said quietly. Instead, we have awakened something far more dangerous than we could have imagined. Commander Hannah stood with her feet shoulder-width apart on the bridge of the HS Thunderbolt, a position that had become second nature through years of military training. The bridge hummed with activity as crew members worked at their stations, preparing for the demonstration that would show the Confederation representatives what human warships could really do. Status report, Hannah called out, her voice calm but carrying the unmistakable tone of authority. All systems green, Commander, replied Lieutenant Kim from the tactical station. Weapons offline as agreed for the demonstration. Hull integrity at 100%. Engines at standby. Hannah nodded and turned her attention to the view screen, which showed the observation vessel carrying the Confederation delegation. The alien ship gleamed in the sunlight, its crystalline structure reflecting the stars in shimmering patterns. Next to it, the Thunderbolt looked brutish and primitive, all hard angles, thick armor plating, and visible weapon mounts. Open channel to the observation vessel, Hannah ordered. The communications officer tapped several buttons. Channel open, Commander. Ambassador Lee, we are ready to begin the demonstration. Your vessel should maintain its current position for safety. The alien's face appeared on the screen. Ambassador Lee had the copper-toned skin typical of his species, with 4 eyes arranged in a diamond pattern. We are prepared, Commander Hannah. Please proceed when ready. Hannah took a deep breath. This demonstration had been carefully planned to showcase human military engineering without revealing too many tactical secrets. The first contact incident 2 years ago had left deep scars on both sides, and this technology exchange was a tentative step toward building trust. Begin demonstration, she ordered. The helmsman, Ensign Ta, executed the command with practiced precision. The Thunderbolt's engines ignited with a controlled burst, propelling the warship forward toward the nearby asteroid field. On the observation vessel, Ambassador Lee and his aides watched with professional interest that quickly turned to alarm. They're heading into the dense part of the field, Lee's aide whispered. At that speed, they can't possibly avoid all those objects. Lee leaned forward, his 4 eyes widening. Perhaps this is an error in translation. Surely they don't intend to. The Thunderbolt charged directly into the asteroid field, its engines pushing the ship to speeds that made precise navigation impossible. The alien observers flinched collectively as the first impact came, a glancing blow from a house-sized chunk of rock that scraped along the warship's port side. Aboard the Thunderbolt, the impact registered as a slight vibration through the deck plates. Port armor holding at 97%, reported Lieutenant Kim calmly. Minor abrasion to outer plating only. Ensign Ta navigated through the field with skill, but not with perfect precision. The ship took hit after hit as it plowed through the densest part of the asteroid belt. Starboard impact, armor at 94%. Bow impact, armor holding at 95%. The reports continued as the Thunderbolt absorbed punishment that would have crippled a Confederation vessel. After 3 minutes of this demonstration, Hannah ordered a complete 180-degree turn, executing it within the field itself, a maneuver that resulted in several more hits. On the observation vessel, Ambassador Lee's skin had paled to a light tan color, a sign of stress in his species. Remarkable, he murmured to his aide. Their ships aren't connected to their pilots through neural links. They're designed to be damaged and repaired. They expect to be hit. His aide, a junior diplomat named Sue, nodded slowly. They don't avoid battle, he replied in a hushed tone. They prepare for it. As the Thunderbolt emerged from the asteroid field and circled back toward the observation vessel, Hannah allowed herself a small smile. The first part of the demonstration had achieved exactly the response she had hoped for. Begin Phase 2, she ordered. The engineering chief, Commander Da, stepped forward. All departments, initiate simulated damage control scenarios. Throughout the ship, crew members moved with practiced efficiency. In engineering, a team sealed off a simulated hull breach in under 40 seconds. On Deck 3, medical personnel treated mock casualties while repair teams rerouted power through backup systems. In the weapons bay, technicians performed a rapid reload drill, replacing missile payloads that hadn't actually been fired. That your species designs for war even in times of peace, he answered without hesitation. Our philosophy is to avoid conflict through superior defensive technology and diplomacy. Yours seems to be preparation for inevitable battle. Hannah considered her words carefully before responding. Perhaps both approaches have merit, Ambassador. Perhaps together, we can find a middle path that incorporates the best of both philosophies. As Ambassador Lee boarded his shuttle to return to the observation vessel, he paused at the hatch. Commander Hannah, one final question if I may. What would you consider the true strength of human warships? Without hesitation, Hannah replied, not our armor or our weapons, Ambassador, but our crews. Every person aboard is prepared to think, adapt, and overcome. That is what makes us formidable. Lee nodded slowly. Indeed, that is what makes you dangerous as well. The distress signal reached Earth Defense Command 6 hours after the Silurian ambush began. Captain Jin sat motionless in the command chair of the HSS Defiant, reading the desperate message for the third time. Confederation Third Fleet under attack by unknown hostile force. Biological ships of enormous size. Weapons ineffective. Request immediate assistance. The message ended with a burst of static. Tactical Officer Han looked up from his console, his face grim. Sir, analysis confirms the message origin. It's from the Confederation Defense Station near the Proxima border. Long-range scans show heavy activity in that sector. Jin nodded slowly. Though the peace between humans and the Galactic Confederation remained fragile after the first contact disaster 3 years ago, this situation demanded action. How many ships can we deploy within the hour? He asked. Commander Ba, his second-in-command, checked the readiness reports. 5, sir. The Defiant, Intrepid, Relentless, Valiant, and Dauntless are all combat-ready. The rest of the fleet is scattered on patrol duties. Jin stood up, his decision made. 5 will have to do. Notify all captains. We launch in 30 minutes. As the bridge crew rushed to prepare for departure, Bai stepped closer to Jin, speaking quietly. Sir, protocol suggests we should wait for reinforcements. 5 ships against an unknown threat that's overwhelming a Confederation fleet. Jin looked his second-in-command in the eye. The Confederation would come to our aid if the situation were reversed, wouldn't they? Bai hesitated before answering honestly. I'm not certain, Captain. Well, I am, Jin replied. Because that's what allies do. And if we want to be true allies with the Confederation, we start by acting like it. Prepare for departure. 28 minutes later, the 5 human warships entered FTL, streaking toward the battle zone at maximum speed. 4 hours later, they arrived at the edge of the Proxima system. The scene that greeted them on the main view screen shocked even the most hardened officers. The once proud Confederation Third Fleet, 23 ships of elegant advanced design, was reduced to scattered debris and drifting hulks. Among the wreckage moved the Silurian vessels, massive organic constructs that resembled deep-sea creatures more than spacecraft. Their surfaces pulsed with bioluminescent patterns as they systematically consumed both ships and escape pods. My God, whispered Commander Ba. "They're eating them." Jin forced himself to focus. Tactical analysis. Han worked his console with practiced efficiency. Silurian forces include approximately 30 large vessels and dozens of smaller craft. Their ships appear to be entirely biological in nature, with no metal components our sensors can detect. They're using some kind of acid projection as their primary weapon, along with, Captain, they have tentacle-like appendages capturing escape pods. Life signs from Confederation vessels? Jin asked, dreading the answer. Faint readings from 3 ships only. Han confirmed. Most of the fleet is already lost. Jin studied the tactical display, noting the Silurian formation. They had spread out in a rough plain, advancing methodically through the system toward the inhabited planets beyond. They're moving like a feeding swarm, he observed. And they're not expecting resistance anymore. He tapped his command console. All ships, this is Captain Jin. Implement communication blackout protocols. Passive sensors only. We're going to hit them hard and fast. Jin turned to his navigation officer. Lieutenant Min, plot an approach vector that keeps us in the shadow of the larger debris fields. We need to get closer without being detected. As the 5 human ships crept closer to the Silurian armada, Jin studied the enemy movements carefully. Their pattern revealed a critical weakness. They were thinking in 2 dimensions, spreading out across a flat plane rather than utilizing the full 3-dimensional nature of space. Maneuver Theta 9, Jin commanded after sharing his observations with the other captains. The 5 human warships scattered in 3 dimensions. The Defiant and Intrepid climbed above the plane of the Silurian formation, while the Valiant and Dauntless dropped below it. The Relentless maintained position, preparing to serve as bait. From the Confederation monitoring station at the edge of the system, Representative Kim and his staff watched the human ships with growing interest. "What are they doing?" asked his aide. "There are only 5 of them against the entire Silurian force." Kim leaned forward, his 4 eyes narrowing. "They're treating space like an ocean with depth," he observed thoughtfully. "Not just a flat battlefield." The human strategy became clear moments later. The Relentless powered up suddenly, making itself visible to Silurian sensors. As several enemy ships turned to investigate, the other 4 human vessels attacked simultaneously from above and below, targeting the biological ships with precision strikes. Aboard the Defiant, Captain Jin watched the first volley hit home. "Railguns and conventional missiles only," he ordered. "Save the nuclear ordnance until we know what we're dealing with." The initial attack caught the Silurians completely by surprise. 6 of their vessels were heavily damaged before they could react, their biological hulls ripped open by the kinetic energy of railgun projectiles, traveling at a significant fraction of light speed. But the Silurians adapted quickly. Their ships began to pulse with bright patterns, communicating across the battlefield. The swarm reorganized, expanding into 3 dimensions as they recognized the nature of the attack. "They're learning," Bai warned. Jin nodded grimly. "As expected. Time for Phase 2. All ships. Execute Pattern Sierra. Deploy countermeasures." The human vessels released clouds of metallic chaff and electronic decoys, creating sensor confusion throughout the battlefield. Using this cover, they regrouped and attacked again, this time targeting what appeared to be command nodes within the Silurian formation. On the bridge of the Defiant, Tactical Officer Han reported with rising excitement. "Direct hit on the largest vessel. It's showing signs of severe internal damage." The victory was short-lived. 3 Silurian ships converged on the Valiant, enveloping the human warship in a cloud of corrosive spray. The ship's armor, designed to withstand conventional weapons, began to dissolve under the biological attack. "Valiant is taking heavy damage," Han reported, his voice tight. "Their engines are failing." Jin opened a direct channel. "Captain Du, can you break free?" The response came through broken and static-filled. "Negative. Hull integrity at 30%. Acid eating through. Evacuating crew to central compartments." "Hold position," Jin ordered. "We're coming to assist." The Defiant charged directly toward the Silurian ships attacking the Valiant, firing all forward weapons. The Intrepid joined the attack from a different vector, creating a crossfire that forced the Silurian vessels to divide their attention. But it was too late for the Valiant. The final transmission from Captain Dew was calm despite the circumstances. "Engine core going critical. We'll take some of them with us." "It's been an honor, Captain Jin." The Valiant exploded with devastating force, destroying 2 Silurian ships and damaging several others. Jin allowed himself only a moment of silence for the fallen before refocusing on the battle. "All ships, new formation. Target their communication nodes. Disrupt their ability to coordinate." The remaining human ships executed the order with precision born of countless drills. They attacked the Silurian vessels that displayed the most complex bioluminescent patterns, theorizing that these were coordinating the swarm's activities. The theory proved correct. As these key ships were damaged or destroyed, the Silurian formation began to show signs of confusion. Their movements became less coordinated, their responses slower, but the cost was high. The Dauntless, its weapons nearly depleted, was surrounded and overwhelmed. Its final act was to detonate its nuclear warheads manually, creating an electromagnetic pulse that temporarily disoriented nearby Silurian vessels. With 2 ships lost, Jin knew they couldn't sustain a prolonged engagement. "Final phase," he ordered. "Target the largest remaining vessel with all nuclear ordnance. Intrepid will deliver the payload. Defiant and Relentless, provide covering fire." The plan worked, but at a terrible price. The Intrepid fought its way to point-blank range of the Silurian command ship, absorbing horrific damage in the process. When Captain Min detonated her ship's entire nuclear arsenal, the resulting explosion destroyed not only the Silurian command vessel, but the Intrepid as well. The effect on the Silurian swarm was immediate and dramatic. Without central coordination, the remaining ships began to retreat, their formation dissolving into chaos. "They're breaking off," Han reported, his voice showing strain from the hours of intense combat. "Moving away from the inhabited planets." Jin nodded slowly, feeling the weight of their losses. "Stand down from combat stations. Begin rescue operations for any Confederation survivors." As the Defiant and Relentless, the only human ships that remained, moved among the wreckage, recovering survivors from damaged Confederation vessels, Jin stared out at the battlefield. 3 human ships lost, hundreds of crew members dead, but the Silurian advance had been checked. On the monitor station, Representative Kim watched with a mixture of awe and horror. When his aide asked what they had just witnessed, Kim replied simply, "The most expensive lesson the Confederation has ever received about human warfare. They sacrifice themselves not just for victory, but for allies they barely trust." He turned away from the viewport. "We must reconsider everything we thought we knew about these people." As rescue operations continued, Captain Jin received a transmission from Earth Defense Command, acknowledging their actions and promising reinforcements. The message ended with words that Jin read aloud to his exhausted bridge crew. "Your actions honor humanity and demonstrate our commitment to galactic security. The sacrifice of your fallen comrades will not be forgotten." Jin closed the message and looked around at his crew, tired, grieving, but unbroken. "Neither will they," he promised quietly. Diplomat Song's 4 eyes blinked rapidly as he stepped aboard the human flagship HSS Invincible. The difference between this vessel and Confederation ships struck him immediately. Where Confederation vessels featured smooth, flowing lines and crystalline structures that channeled energy in harmony with their surroundings, the human ship felt aggressive. "Welcome aboard, Diplomat Song." Captain Jun greeted him at the airlock. She stood straight, her uniform crisp and adorned with small metal pins that Song recognized as symbols of rank and achievement. "We're honored by your visit." Song inclined his upper body in the formal greeting of his species. "The honor is mine, Captain." The heroic actions of human ships during the Silurian incursion have changed many perspectives within the Confederation. Captain Jun nodded, her expression neutral but her eyes alert. "I hope today's tour will further improve understanding between our peoples. Shall we begin?" As they walked through the main corridor, Song noticed the walls were not the plain metal he had expected. Instead, they displayed flags and symbols, some ancient-looking, others more modern. Crew members moved efficiently through the passageways, many nodding respectfully to the captain as they passed. "These images," Song inquired, gesturing to the walls, "they have historical significance." Captain Jun paused beside a particularly weathered flag, its fabric protected behind a clear panel. "This is the battle flag of an ocean vessel called the Constitution, from over 400 years ago. We carry our history with us," Diplomat Song. They continued walking, passing more displays, some showing ships, others depicting battles or bearing simple phrases in human languages. Song noticed that crew members often touched certain displays as they passed, a quick brush of fingers that seemed almost ritualistic. "Your people touch the walls frequently," he observed. "Is this a technical function?" June smiled slightly. "No, it's tradition. Some say it's for luck. Others do it to connect with the ship's spirit." "Spirit," Song repeated, his copper-toned skin shifting to a lighter shade of confusion. "A manner of speaking," June explained as they turned a corner. "But yes, in a way. Human ships have personalities, histories, souls, if you will." They entered a larger space that June identified as the mess hall. Here, Song was startled to see more personalization. The tables were standard military issue, but the walls displayed photographs of crew members, landscapes from Earth and human colonies, and more historical images. One wall bore the ship's name, Invincible, in large letters, with smaller text beneath listing dates and locations. "Our battle history," June explained, following Song's gaze. "Each engagement the Invincible has participated in, along with the names of crew members lost in action." Song moved closer to read the names. "You commemorate your dead this way." "We remember them," June corrected gently. "A ship carries the memory of everyone who has served aboard her." As they continued the tour, Song noticed more examples of personalization. Many crew stations featured small photographs or trinkets. One navigation officer had painted a small blue bird on her console. A weapons technician had a string of beads wrapped around his monitor. "Are these decorations permitted by regulations?" Song asked, genuinely curious. "Within reason," Jun replied. "It doesn't interfere with function, and it improves morale. Each person makes their space their own." They reached the bridge, where the personalization was more subtle but still present. The command chair bore a small plaque with names. Previous captains, Song realized. The view screen was surrounded by a painted border of stars, barely noticeable unless one looked closely. "Your bridge seems more restrained," Song observed. Captain Jun nodded. "The bridge is the face we present to the universe. But make no mistake." She gestured to a small emblem embedded in the arm of her command chair. "The human touch is still here." After touring several more decks, including engineering where Song was fascinated by the ritual of the engineers speaking to their machines as they worked, they arrived at a section of corridor that made the diplomat stop in his tracks. The entire wall was covered with silhouettes, simplified outlines of various spacecraft, some Song recognized as Silurian vessels. At the bottom of the display were dates and coordinates. "These are," Song began, his skin shifting to a darker hue. "Kills," Jones said simply. "Enemy vessels destroyed by the Invincible." Song stared at the display. His species prided themselves on diplomatic solutions, on defensive technology that prevented conflict rather than weapons that excelled in it. This celebration of destruction felt alien and uncomfortable. "You personify your weapons," Song said to Captain Jun, his tone carefully neutral. "You give them identities." Jun ran her hand along the bulkhead adorned with the silhouettes of destroyed enemy vessels. "A ship is more than metal. It's home. It's family. We fight harder for things we love." "And the kills are part of that identity?" Song asked. "They're part of the ship's history," Jum corrected, just as our losses are. Both remind us of the cost of conflict and the value of victory. They continued walking, Song lost in thought until they reached the final stop on their tour, the Memorial Garden. Here, in a circular chamber lit by soft lights, plants from Earth grew in carefully tended containers. Plaques bearing names and dates lined the walls. Every human ship has a space like this, June explained quietly, a place to remember those lost in service. Song moved slowly around the room, reading names. I notice some of these are not human names. No, June confirmed. Those are Confederation crew members who fought alongside us during the Silurian battle. We honor all who serve with us, regardless of species. Song stopped before a small fountain in the center of the garden. The gentle sound of water created a peaceful atmosphere that contrasted sharply with the martial character of the rest of the ship. This reminds me of meditation chambers in our vessels, he said. The purpose is similar, June agreed. Reflection, remembrance, renewal. As they left the Memorial Garden and headed back toward the airlock, Song found himself struggling to reconcile the contradictions he had observed. The celebration of martial prowess alongside the solemn remembrance of its cost, the personalization of instruments of war, the fierce pride combined with genuine reverence. Captain June, he said as they approached the airlock, there is one question I must ask before I depart. Of course. Your people name your ships after concepts: invincible, defiant, relentless. You decorate them with symbols of battle. You treat them as living entities. Does this not glorify warfare? June considered the question carefully before answering. We don't glorify war, Diplomat Song. We respect its reality. Humans learn through bitter experience that conflict is sometimes unavoidable. When that time comes, we face it not with clinical detachment, but with passion and determination. She gestured to the ship around them. The names, the symbols, the traditions, they aren't about loving war. They're about loving each other, about honoring commitments, about fighting with all our heart when fighting becomes necessary. Song nodded slowly. I begin to understand, I think, though I find the concept challenging. As we find some of your concepts challenging, Jun replied with a diplomatic smile. But that is why this exchange is valuable. As Song prepared to depart, Captain Jun presented him with a small metal emblem, a miniature of the Invincible's ship patch, a token of our meeting, she explained, and of the growing alliance between our peoples. Song accepted the gift with appropriate formality, though inwardly he remained unsettled by what he had seen. The human approach to warfare, their embrace of it as something personal rather than abstract, felt fundamentally alien to Confederation philosophy. 3 days later, Song submitted his report to the Confederation High Council. His description of human military culture was detailed and unflinching. Humans do not separate themselves from their weapons as we do. They do not view combat as a regrettable necessity to be conducted with emotional distance. Instead, they invest their vessels with history, tradition, and identity. They create emotional bonds with machines designed for destruction. This approach is, by Confederation standards, disturbing but undeniably effective. The report continued with a thorough analysis of human naval tactics, training methods, and technological approaches. Song concluded with a recommendation that surprised many council members. Despite philosophical and ethical misgivings, I strongly urge the Council to implement selected human training programs for Confederation Defense Forces. The Silurian threat demands adaptation, and humans have demonstrated capabilities we would be foolish to ignore. 2 weeks later, the first mixed human Confederation training exercises began. Confederation officers struggled to adapt to human-style drills that emphasize damage control, improvisation, and fighting through injuries rather than avoiding damage entirely. Many found the exercises distasteful or even barbaric. But when simulated Silurian attacks consistently overwhelmed traditional Confederation defensive formations, while human-led mixed groups achieved significantly higher survival rates, attitudes began to change. Captain Jun, assigned as chief liaison for the training program, watched with quiet satisfaction as a Confederation ship commander successfully completed a damage control exercise for the first time. "You're learning quickly," she commented as the officer emerged from the simulation pod. "Your methods are unorthodox," the Confederation officer replied, wiping sweat from his face. "But I cannot argue with results." June smiled. "The greatest strength of any ship isn't its weapons or its armor. It's the crew," the officer finished, showing he had absorbed at least one human lesson. As the training program expanded, small changes began appearing aboard Confederation vessels. Some ships started displaying their names more prominently. Crew members began personalizing their stations in subtle ways. A few captains instituted ceremonies to honor vessels that had been lost in battle. The High Council observed these changes with mixed reactions. Some members worried about the militarization of Confederation culture. Others saw practical value in adopting certain human approaches. When Diplomat Song was asked for his assessment of these cultural shifts, he responded with unexpected directness. "We have always prided ourselves on harmony and defensive technology. These remain worthy ideals, but the Silurians taught us that some threats cannot be reasoned with or deflected. If we must fight, and it seems we must, then perhaps there is wisdom in fighting not just with our technology, but with our hearts." The combined fleet of human and Confederation vessels hung in space at the edge of the Antares system, a gleaming barrier of metal and energy positioned to protect the densely populated Confederation core worlds. Intelligence reports had tracked the main Silurian force, now merely 100 vessels strong, as it consumed its way through 3 frontier systems. Admiral Minho stood on the bridge of the HSS Steadfast, his flagship, and the newest addition to the human fleet. The view screen showed the vast formation stretching out before him. 27 human warships surrounded by 63 Confederation vessels of various classes and designs. Never before had such a powerful combined force been assembled. "Status report," Minho ordered, his voice calm despite the tension that filled the bridge. "All human vessels report ready, Admiral," replied his communications officer. Confederation fleet commanders confirmed their ships are in position according to the battle plan. Minho nodded, studying the tactical display. The formation they had adopted was unlike anything either humans or the Confederation had used before, a blend of human aggressive tactics and Confederation defensive technology. The human ships formed the center of the line, their heavier armor and firepower creating a solid core, while the more maneuverable Confederation vessels formed protective wings on either side. "Long-range sensors detecting multiple signatures approaching," announced the tactical officer. Silhouettes matched Silurian bioships. Estimate arrival in 30 minutes. Minho opened the fleet-wide communication channel. "All ships, this is Admiral Minho. The enemy we face today threatens not just one species or one world, but all civilized life in this sector of the galaxy. Today we stand together, human and Confederation alike, as defenders of all we hold dear." He paused, looking around at his human crew, then at the images of the Confederation commanders on the secondary displays. "We have trained together. We have planned together. Now we will fight together. All ships, execute battle plan Dawn." Throughout the fleet, crews moved to combat stations. On Confederation vessels, captains activated their advanced shield systems and prepared their elegant but powerful energy weapons. On human ships, weapons officers armed missile batteries and railguns, while damage control teams stood ready. The waiting was always the hardest part. Minho used the time to review the battle plan once more, though he knew it by heart. The combined fleet would maintain formation until the Silurians committed to their attack vector. Then the human ships would push forward aggressively, while Confederation vessels provided covering fire and protected against flanking maneuvers. "Contact," called out the tactical officer. "Silurian Vanguard has entered the system. Count: 87 large vessels and over 200 smaller craft." Minho's expression remained steady despite the odds. "Predicted approach." "They're spreading out, sir. wide formation consistent with their previous feeding patterns. Good, Minho nodded. They're still thinking like predators, not strategists. He activated his command channel. All ships, hold position. Let them come to us. The Silurian armada advanced steadily, their biological ships pulsing with patterns of light that served as both communication and threat display. As they neared the combined fleet, they began to accelerate. They're charging, noted Commander Tai, Minho's second in command. As expected, Minho replied. Execute Phase 1. The battle began with a simultaneous volley from all human vessels, a wall of missiles and railgun projectiles that streaked toward the approaching Silurians. Confederation ships added their energy weapons to the barrage, creating a deadly crossfire. The Silurians absorbed the first wave of attacks with typical resilience, their organic hulls healing even as they took damage. But the combined firepower was greater than anything they had faced before, and several of the leading vessels began to falter. They're adapting their formation, reported the tactical officer, shifting to a more concentrated attack pattern. Minho nodded grimly. They're learning. Begin Phase 2. The human ships surged forward while the Confederation vessels maintained position, creating a spearhead formation that drove directly into the center of the Silurian armada. It was a tactic that would have been suicide for either fleet alone, but the combination of human offensive power and Confederation defensive technology made it viable. The battle devolved into a chaotic melee as ships maneuvered in 3 dimensions, weapons fire crisscrossing the void. Minho maintained a steady stream of orders, coordinating the human vessels while Confederation Admiral Lee did the same for his ships. Their cooperation, practiced in countless simulations, worked better than either had dared hope. 3 hours into the battle, the combined fleet had destroyed or disabled 23 Silurian vessels, while losing only 7 of their own. An exchange rate far better than previous engagements. But the Silurians were adapting, focusing their attacks on the joints between human and Confederation formations, probing for weaknesses. Sir, called out the damage control officer, the Sheffield is reporting critical hull damage. They're requesting permission to withdraw for repairs. Denied. Minho replied firmly. No withdrawals. We maintain formation at all costs. He opened a direct channel to the Sheffield's captain. Captain Wu, can your ship still fight? Yes, sir, came the strained reply. We've lost 2 decks to acid damage, but weapons are operational. Then you stay in the line. Redirect power from damaged sections and keep firing. This pattern repeated itself throughout the long hours of battle. Human ships took punishment that would have caused Confederation vessels to retreat, fighting on with compromised systems and partial crews. Meanwhile, Confederation ships used their superior maneuverability to protect damaged human vessels until emergency repairs could be completed. 18 hours into the engagement, exhaustion gripped crews across the fleet. Stimulants and rotating duty shifts kept them functioning, but the strain showed on every face. The battle had settled into a grinding war of attrition, with both sides losing ships steadily. On the bridge of the HSS Relentless, Captain Yuna wiped blood from a cut on her forehead as damage reports flooded in from all decks. Engineering reports engines at 40% capacity, her first officer informed her. Life support is failing on decks 3 through 7. We've sealed those sections. Yuma nodded grimly, studying her tactical display. The Relentless had been fighting on the front line for hours, its armor scored and melted by repeated Silurian attacks. But amid the chaos of battle, her sensors had detected something significant, a pattern in the Silurian movements suggesting a central coordination point. There, she said, pointing to a large Silurian vessel near the rear of their formation. That's their command node. Notice how the light patterns always originate there before spreading to other ships. Her tactical officers studied the readings. Confirmed, Captain. That appears to be their control vessel. Yuna opened a channel to Admiral Minho, quickly sharing her discovery. Can you reach it? Minho asked after considering the information. Yuna checked her ship's status. The Relentless was badly damaged, but its engines still functioned. "Yes, sir. We can make it through their line." "Do it," Minho ordered. "I'll arrange covering fire." Yuna closed the channel and turned to her bridge crew. "Plot an intercept course. Divert all remaining power to engines and forward weapons." The Relentless surged forward, breaking formation as several other human ships provided covering fire. Confederation vessels created a distraction on the opposite flank, drawing Silurian attention away from Yuna's advance. As they penetrated deeper into the Silurian formation, the attacks intensified. Acid sprays dissolved sections of hull plating. Biological torpedoes exploded against their flanks. Systems failed across the ship. "Engine efficiency dropping," reported the engineering officer. "We're losing speed." "Maintain course," Yuna ordered calmly. They were close now. The Silurian command vessel filled their view screen, its massive organic hull pulsing with complex patterns of light. But the damage to the Relentless had become critical. Life support was failing throughout the ship. The engines were on the verge of collapse. Yuna made her decision in an instant. "All hands, abandon ship. Emergency pods, launch on my mark." Her crew stared at her in shock. "That's an order," she said firmly. "I'll pilot the final approach myself." Her first officer stepped forward. "Captain, protocol requires." "Protocol be damned," Yuna cut him off. "There's no time to argue. This ship won't survive much longer, but it can complete one final mission." After a tense moment, her officers began the evacuation procedures. Escape pods jettisoned from the Relentless, small crafts carrying the surviving crew away from their dying ship. Alone on the bridge, Captain Yuna plotted the final course herself. The Relentless had just enough power for one last maneuver. She opened a channel to Admiral Minho. "Sir, Relentless is on final approach. Crew evacuated. Request covering fire for escape pods." There was a brief pause before Minho's voice replied, understanding the unspoken message. "Acknowledged, Captain. Your service will be remembered." Yuna smiled slightly as she closed the channel. She addressed the empty bridge, speaking to the ship itself. "One last run, old friend. Make it count." With her hand steady on the manual controls, she gave the final order. Ramming speed. The Relentless, engines burning beyond safe limits, accelerated directly toward the Silurian command vessel. Defense mechanisms fired acidic sprays that dissolved more of the human ship's hull, but nothing could stop its momentum. The impact was catastrophic for both vessels. The Relentless's reactors detonated upon collision, creating an explosion that completely destroyed the Silurian command node and sent shockwaves through nearby ships. Across the battlefield, the effect was immediate and dramatic. The coordinated patterns of light across the Silurian vessels faltered and then dissolved into chaos. Without central direction, the biological ships began to act individually, their attacks becoming uncoordinated and ineffective. Admiral Minho seized the opportunity. "All ships, full attack. Target isolated vessels." The combined fleet surged forward, human and Confederation ships fighting side by side with renewed purpose. Over the next 3 hours, they systematically destroyed or disabled the confused Silurian forces. By the time the last enemy vessel was neutralized, the combined fleet had lost 32 ships, a heavy toll, but far less than expected against such a powerful enemy. As the battle ended, recovery operations began. Escape pods were retrieved, including those from the Relentless. Captain Yuna's sacrifice became known throughout the fleet, her final act credited with turning the tide of battle. 1 year later, at the shipyards orbiting Earth, Admiral Minho stood before a viewing window, watching as construction proceeded on a new class of vessel. Beside him stood Confederation Ambassador Lee, who had once been so unsettled by human military culture. "The Yuna class," Minho said with pride, gesturing to the half-completed ship. "Our first true hybrid design." The vessel under construction clearly showed both human and Confederation influences, It had the robust armor and redundant systems of a human warship, but incorporated the elegant energy distribution and shield technology of Confederation vessels. A fitting memorial, Ambassador Lee acknowledged. My engineers report that the integration of our technologies has proceeded better than anticipated. Minho nodded. Your energy systems are revolutionary. Our structural designs are practical. Together, they create something greater than either alone. The ambassador turned to face Minho directly. When we first encountered humans, many in the Confederation feared your species. Your warships seemed designed for aggression, not defense. And now? Minho asked. Now we understand that preparedness is not the same as aggression. That strength can protect as well as threaten. Lee gestured to the shipyard, where several more hybrid vessels were under construction. These ships will defend all our peoples. As they watched, workers attached a nameplate to the bow of the lead vessel, SS Captain Yuna. We still name our ships, Minho noted with a slight smile. As do we, now Lee replied. Some traditions are worth adopting. The shipyard continued its work, a symbol of the new era that had begun. An era where human determination and Confederation technology combined to create a stronger defense than either could have achieved alone. The Silurian threat remained at the edges of known space, but it would face a united front if it ever returned. And at the center of that unity were the ships that carried the legacy of both civilizations forward, warships that were no longer feared by allies, but by enemies alone.